My name is Emily McKinney, and my pronouns are she, her. And that congestion you're hearing, my doctor assures me, is a sinus infection, not COVID-19. As some of you may know, I'm a board-certified music therapist in my other day job, and I currently serve hospice patients and their families. Reverend Michelle reached out to me to ask about what deep listening, our theme for this month, is like in those intimate bedside musical interactions, and if there might be a message there that could serve this congregation in our exploration of deep listening. She rightly intuited that so much of my work at the bedside is grounded in deep, multi-sensory listening, and that there are spiritual lessons we can take from this. I'll go so far as to say that the kind of listening I'm going to share about today is a rigorous spiritual practice, a form of UU mysticism, if you will. This kind of presence to and for one another is our Holy Communion, and it has the power to transform this church community, our larger community, and the whole world. It happens fairly often that when I arrive at a patient's home, I have to raise my voice over the din of the TV blaring away in the background to ask, "Is it all right if we turn the TV off while we visit?" My patients will often look startled and reply, "Oh, of course. I didn't even realize it was on." How is that possible? When we are surrounded by constant noise, we tend to forget it's even there. This is true in our larger shared life as well. There is noise all around us, and right now it feels especially loud. Like indoor birthday party for a toddler and their entire preschool class loud. My life is saturated by the visual noise of the laundry and dishes piles, the internal noise reciting my litany of undone to-dos, and let's not forget just how loud the news and social media is these days. Pandemic, election, social and political and environmental unrest. My spiritual ears hurt already. This level of noise leads us to shout past one another on a regular basis. This climate cultivates misunderstanding and disconnection. As human beings, we are hardwired for deep connection with ourselves and one another, and for listening to and telling stories. Restoring a sense of deep, integrated, interpersonal connection not only has the power to heal so many of our collective ills, it is indeed the only thing that can. It's part of my job to offer my patients this kind of healing, intentional, and intense listening. I must be in a relatively calm and quiet space internally myself to be able to do this. I must have room to take in what's being offered. So when I am at the bedside, I try to take in the total sensory experience of that encounter. This tells me important things about how I or the rest of their hospice team might need to care for their body, such as noticing subtle indicators of pain or anxiety. But it also tells me more about how to care for their heart and soul. An example of why this is so important is the experience of pain. Many times I may ask if someone is experiencing any pain, and they may report it's a 0 out of 10. However, they may be showing obvious visual signs of physical discomfort. When I change my question with respect to some people's difficulty with admitting to pain, and I ask if they're having any discomfort, they may reply, "Oh, my back is just killing me." If I had only taken their first words on face value, I would have missed what's actually being communicated. How many times have we had this experience with our own healthcare providers, who occasionally even seem to miss what we are explicitly trying to share about our own experience? It can literally be life-saving to be listened to in a deep, multisensory way. When I listen with my ears, I might hear a slight hitch in someone's voice as they mention a particular relationship or circumstance in their life. When I listen with my eyes, I can see how fast someone is breathing, what their body posture is doing, and whether that has changed at all since I first walked into the room. I may notice that their eyes misted over ever so slightly during one particular line of lyrics that we sing together, but not another. This informs how I may ask follow-up questions that lead them into greater permission to share their inner world with me. I listen to the rhythm of the movements of their body and notice where their comfortable voice range is, and move all of our shared music experiences into the musical space that is most comfortable for them. Listening with my sense of touch in the pre-COVID days allows me to know yet a little more of what's going on in their experience. There's a lot of different tones of voice someone can use when they take your hand. Or it may occur to me that this person is actually cold and may not have the capacity to ask someone for a blanket. Even my sense of smell can provide insights. It might guide me to notice fresh flowers by their bed or something warming in their oven, and create even more opportunities for me to connect with this person. As an aside, I always hoped that the scent of fresh coffee already brewing on cold mornings before choir practice in the sanctuary would allow our church musicians to hear how much I care for and appreciate them. If it sounds like it takes a lot of focus to devote this much attention to someone else's experience, you're right. And there's yet another important layer to this. When we seek to offer this kind of presence to another person, we must also keep one ear, or maybe just half an ear, on our own internal noise. If I'm not careful, a reaction to something that someone said will charge all through me and change my responses to them in unhelpful ways before I even have a chance to consciously realize that something they have said or done has hit a tripwire within me. I wonder how many times we have seen that exact scenario play out during our various congregational and committee meetings. It's well worth the effort to also listen to what someone is drawing out in me and make slow, careful choices about how to respond in the moment. Sometimes the greatest gift I can offer is my attentive silence. I posit that this may hold true in a few of our committee and congregational meetings as well. This is all so much easier said than done. This kind of deep, multi-sensory listening is a spiritual practice. And I do mean practice in the same way you must practice to learn to play an instrument, speak a language, or ride a bike. It must be done intentionally and often. Few people are naturally skilled at listening in this way, and every single one of us can improve our skills with practice. Of course, this is all complicated even more by the fact that almost all, if not all, of our interactions with one another take place over video or phone these days. There's a practice that I'll call noticing and naming that can help us here. Notice that interpersonal communication is diminished in an online setting, and name that explicitly. That might look like stating out loud that you and others have permission to look away from the camera to think, or to state that you are allowing silence, even though it's awkward, as a way to be present with one another and to practice deep noticing and careful responding. You might notice that someone is Zooming from a different location than usual, and name it by asking if the rhythm of their life has changed significantly in the last week. Or you might notice a little bubble of tension arising in yourself during a committee meeting, and name it by stating, I've noticed I'm feeling a little tense in reaction to this conversation. I'd like to take a moment to be quiet and think about how to respond. We do these things a little more naturally in person. For this online format, it really does help to notice and name our observations more explicitly. And this will also help the more neurodiverse folks among us who may have a harder time reading facial expressions and other nonverbal communication cues. Now, I've given some suggestions about how to try your hand and eyes and ears and nose at this kind of deep listening. But I'd like to talk about why it's worth all the trouble. I mentioned before that we are surrounded by a constant roar of turmoil and noise. We show up to this and other church spaces each week, often with all that din still roaring along inside us. Now, many UUs are rational and empirical beings in their approach to life and the world. That means that what our senses can tell us and what the mind can parse out logically are what it's all about in this life. In that way, then, there is nothing more a holy communion than offering the full power and presence of all of our senses to another person. Transcending the internal and external noise to clearly understand one another is our mystic encounter. I've always been moved by this line from Les Miserables. To love another person is to see the face of God. I always thought, wow, that's it? All I have to do to experience divine transcendence and wonder is to love another person? And then I remember people. Have you met people lately? Loving them can be a big ask these days. But I believe loving people with our full intentional listening can change this community and the larger world. Can you even imagine what it would be like if the next time we met to discuss our church budget, every person in the room had an internal quiet stillness and was prepared to pay very close attention to every subtle cue and every form of communication from the rest of the people there? What would happen if we were paying close enough attention to notice that someone's jaw clenched ever so tightly at the mention of changing a line item on the budget before they smiled broadly and asked to move on? What would our committee meetings look like if each person chose to be accountable for their own internal emotional reactions and could pause and think before making the statement, well, actually, this isn't so much a question as a comment? And when one of us has an internal tripwire, what a gift the others around us could offer by simply noticing we're breathing a little faster and checking in with us before moving on. How much more could the gifts and talents of our members shine if we were all paying close attention to each other and asking what's not yet being shared in this space? How much more loved and supported would our visitors feel if we took the time to really see and really hear them during our initial encounter, and then took the time to follow up on what we heard the next time we saw them? When was the last time you asked someone in this community, "How are you?" and actually wanted the long answer? I believe that human relationships in American society are painfully fractured right now. I don't have to agree with someone to offer them the gift of this deep listening, though. And that's really important, whether we're in a church meeting or I'm interacting with my neighbors. Choosing to listen past the words, past the surface, choosing to try to take in the whole human person in front of me is a bold declaration of our first principle. When I choose to be in this holy communion of sensory attention with you, I affirm your inherent worth and dignity. I remind myself of this as I run past my neighbor's very large political yard signs each morning. I forced myself the other day to listen to more than that, to take in their house and yard and find other things to appreciate and notice about them. I know their child has a tire swing and is gifted with sidewalk chalk. I know that they leave for work at the same dark early hour I am out for my run. I remember they are human beings worthy of my listening and my love. We likely never will agree on some things, but I'm sure willing to try to listen. I offer this as a path and a practice for this beautiful, diverse community. I love all of you, and we may never agree on some things, but I'm willing to see and hear you fully. May we all find ourselves willing to offer this sacred gift to one another. Amen, and blessed be.